Well, someone didn't realize she'd hit the live button without transforming, without doing the studio stuff. You guys got to see a little bit me, what I'm like off camera. Hey there, everyone. How you doing? I am tired. It is my own fault. Yesterday I did a book club stream. Then I did a 2.5 hour happy hour stream on Kevin's channel. Then I did another like 3 or 4 hours doing D&D. So I'm a little out of it. I'm gonna admit this show might not be the best, but I promise every Sunday I'm gonna be here unless I'm sick or some other thing. So yeah, here I am, slightly less organized than usual, and not really sure what I'm gonna talk about, but we'll figure that out. We'll figure that all out. Yeah. So the topic of the show today is sort of hello Angus, is about resistance to being white people, especially because that's what more of my expertise is, talking to and about white people who really don't want to move the conversation on in terms of making progress with racial relations or racial tensions or racial equality. So I've talked a lot about how even though I wasn't raised in a racist home and I didn't have to overcome racist attitudes, I was still conditioned in terms of being a nice white person, a good white person, to be quite passive. Sorry. I also I needed a shower today and I just didn't have one yet, so I'm kind of rocking the I should wear a hat look. But yeah, I was sort of paralyzed with this complacency, or like it's not my place to say and it's not really my problem and I'm a good person, as opposed to actually confronting these issues. And I've noticed the more that I speak out and speak up, the more I attract white people who are going to criticize me. And so I thought we should talk a little bit about that, like the ways in which people who are in the control, like the power, the hegemonic, the power group, the people who have control over things and sort of determine how things go, the dominant cultural powers, how they resist reforms and how they push back against it. So I see some people in the chats, so why don't we ask, you guys have a question. I'm going to make the chat text a bit bigger. Oh, that's not bigger. And I also feel a sneeze coming on. I'm going to have to sneeze. This will be fun. Huh? Alright. Yeah. Okay, got my little hanky here, as I always do. We're gonna watch a PragerUrine video. Yeah, this one's on white privilege. Sorry. This one's on or white guilt, or how to end white privilege. So it seemed like a perfect way to. I haven't watched it yet, so we'll explore it together. But my anticipation, my prediction, would be that they are going to be quite defensive of white privilege, actually, and they're going to undermine the idea that white privilege is a problem. Or if there is a I forgot where I was going with that, because Donnie said something in the chat, so I want to just check in with the chat, you guys, people there, see what you're saying. Hello from Oz, from Angus. I thought you were muted. You had your volume too low. Hey, don't. It could have been me. Honestly, I mess up so many times. Why were the veterans EDL and so what protesting? So Mr. O, I'll just say Mr. O. There were protests in London. They were initially billed to be a counter-protest against the Black Lives Matter anti-racism protests. So there were a bunch of people, men, like 90% or 100% men from the videos, white, of course, who wanted to counter-protest anti-racism, which makes you a racist. They wanted to use the excuse of protecting statues. There's something certainly about coming to the defense of inanimate objects that have been molded in a way to represent racist white guys that really get living, breathing, human being white guys on the far right pretty worked up. There's just something about protecting the statues of racists and defending the reputation of racists rather than acknowledging it as part of our history and part of who those people were, and being honest with ourselves and our culture and our future in terms of they weren't perfect, they did mess up, and it's okay to criticize people who messed up. It's okay to criticize slaveholders. We don't have to excuse these white men just because they were white men. They can have flaws. They can be morally imperfect. They can be something we can be better than. We can improve on the founding fathers. We can improve on, Churchill, even though he fought for democracy. Whose democracy was he fighting for and whose democracy was he undermining? These are conversations that grown-ups should be able to have. But if you have a sense of identity that is very much bound up in a perfect country, a flawless country, or a humble country that understands and acknowledges its past pain, when it really doesn't, it just tells itself that so that it can move on. When you get genuine criticism, it's going to hurt because you aren't emotionally prepared to deal with those truths because you've been lied to or you've lied to yourself about the true scope and impact of what people who you look up to did. So the EDL were protesting because someone had graffitied a Churchill statue that took 15 to 20 minutes to clean off. And to prove how super cool they were with, the government, they picked fights with and got into fights with and threw things at the police. So they were thugs looking for an excuse to start a fight. That's it. I could have just said that at the beginning. Sorry. That would be the issue. All right. Are we going to watch a PragerU? Yes, we are. Evening all to the Lucky Wanderer. In a way, I'm kind of pre-disastered. I'd already had some people who don't like you, so there's less downside. Yeah, my family were shitty, so it was easy for to let go of the racists. We moved out of Los Angeles to Oregon coast. Oh, right. So much white. It's kind of creepy. I grew up where everybody was white. And for me, I was 17 years old. I flew out to Philadelphia to attend this youth conference on racism. And it was me and one other white girl that I flew out with. And there was maybe one other white person there. And otherwise, it was 25 black teenagers and 3 white people. And it was the first time I'd been the minority in a room. And it definitely was a shoe on the other foot. Oh my gosh, black people live with this all the time. Where you walk into a room and you're like, who do I sit with? And you're like, oh, do I go sit with the white people or go make friends there? Or then does it make me a racist? And so having lived around the world and obviously with lots of different backgrounds and languages even and perspectives, when I go back to Wisconsin, I just look around the room and I go, oh my God, it's so white. It's so white. Everybody is so white. And for me, that's not necessarily inherently a bad thing, but it is inherently deficient. A room of all white people isn't evil or bad in and of itself, but what it does do is it lacks a lot of what America is. And so I think that's certainly my perspective. So I get that whole so much white. I go back, oh my God, where is any diversity? Is everybody German or Swedish or Polish in this room? And that's, maybe European diversity, but it's not really cultural diversity. Mr. O, no worries about answering your question. What else am I going to do? I have nothing prepared for this show. That's not entirely true. We're going to watch some PragerU and dunk on racists. How about that? Yeah, so just kind of getting back to it. Things that maybe you guys can, in the chat, think about stuff you've seen as well. Emotionally, I have seen people try to silence me speaking up on behalf of criticizing white privilege or explaining it or defending the attacks on racist policies and practices and individuals who have racist views that end up, knocking off to the quality of other people's lives. One thing they'll try to do is undermine me as a white person. If I say something in defense of Black Lives Matter, they will mention, you're white, what do you know? So they'll actually use being white as a weapon to undermine your legitimacy in discussing issues that affect people of color. You're talking out of school. You don't know what you're talking about. You're, basically trying to take away your confidence, take away your confidence, to speak out and to speak up. If you doubt yourself, then you're much less likely to give voice to your concerns. And I am like, just sometimes, it really hits me how, especially white guys, cis white guys, just like feel entitled to have an opinion about everything. I did some searches on Trump and polling because I wanted to see news coverage of the most recent polling information. And I came across all these amateur videos, which is great, on polling. But I went through them, and they're all white guys with no degrees. They're all white guys, like a 18-year-old, like a 20-something-year-old. And they just like, hey, I have no qualifications here whatsoever, but I'm going to read something, and I'm going to make a video, and I'm going to give my opinion. And so there's just this sort of abundance of mediocre white guy confidence. And yet myself as a professional, if I was going to do a video, I would I'd want to check the methodology, and I'd want to do this, and I'd get so many ducks in a row that it actually might stop me from making the video because I'd want to be perfect. And so, I think there's a lot that gets played on that anxiety of making a mistake or screwing up. So trying to undermine you as a white person, I find less of the sort of race traitor accusations or somehow being racist against white people. It generally goes the way that I have been gaslit or tone policed, was really, as a white person, you have no legitimacy speaking out on these issues. And that is a way to silence us. It's a way to stop progress. So don't let the bullies try to silence you by telling you you aren't entitled to speak, or you don't know enough, or you can't speak for Black people's experiences. When you listen to Black people and you can quote them and their experiences. And so just some thoughts. So let me see. Representation matters. Yes, Lucky Wander, it so matters. It really does. You can't make, if you're not at the table, you don't have a voice in what happens. If you're not at the table presently representing descriptively and substantively, we can get back to Hannah Pitkin and her great book on the concept of representation. But being in the room is more than just sort of being symbolically there. Symbolism is important, right? So visibly seeing a diverse group of people represented, compare the Democratic Party, which, in terms of its diversity, to the Republican Party. There is just a credibility you get when you look like the people you want to represent. Symbolically, that is a demonstration to a commitment. And then descriptively, you're in there to work on issues that you have a direct experience with. So, and then substantively. So descriptive representation, substantive representation, symbolic representation, there's a whole bunch of other ones. But yes, being in the room, representation matters. A lot of Scandinavians around here. Yeah, I grew up with mostly Polish Germans, but then as you get to northern Wisconsin, you get Norwegians and some Swedes as well. You get some Olga and Sven jokes. I can't remember the moment, Angus writes, I realized Australia had a racism problem. 1988. Oh, you can remember it. My father took me to what he called the town camp for Aboriginal people outside a little town. Whoa. Wow. Town camp. Yikes. Donne, I have an observation. It's like a thing. DNF fan writes, I'm kind of glad my mom seems to have learned that telling me to have babies with a white guy is pretty racist, and cheers on BLM when they're on the news. Yeah. Also, I've seen my dad, again, not openly racist, but actually being willing to bring up issues of police violence and discrimination. It happened, we had a conversation about the video of the man who was executed by the police while he was running away. Do you guys remember that? He was sort of trying to run away from the police, and the cop just shot him in the back in the middle of a field and killed him. My dad brought that up to me, and we had a whole conversation at that point, and I was pretty surprised. Just that he would be, the way that it had affected his views. Not saying before he wasn't a nice person, but seeing that video, it stuck with him. And it really transformed his mind. And he also brought up the most recent video with George Floyd. So I think these do have an impact. My methodology is being a cis-het white guy. There you go. All right. Paul Ryan photo of their first year's elephant so white. Oh, yeah, I agree. GOP, make no effort. And that's why it's so important to them to put out the couple people that they have over and over and over again as their shields. So yeah, let's see what PragerU has to say here about again, this is going to be no ends of annoying. I am positive. What's it called? How to End White Privilege. All right, this is going to be so crap. But I promised you guys entertainment, and then it'll probably be a short show because I've got a Patreon hangout yet tonight as well. And it's only a 5-minute PragerU video, so we should be able to endure it. All right, let's get lectured on how to preserve white privilege by people pretending that they actually care about undermining. And how about I actually let you guys hear the sound? I should put on the sound. That helps a lot. All right.
Woke white people, I'd like to ask you a favor. Please stop asking for forgiveness for your white privilege.
Oh, here we go. Here we go. Like, here's a way to immediately start with white people shut up. Now, I would agree. If it's not, I don't even think that it's the case. This might be. I'm going to speculate that this is a 100% straw man. I am not familiar with anyone. I've never seen any articles that tell white people to go up to black people and ask them for forgiveness for white privilege. So the whole idea that I'm just going to say at the start, I doubt this even happens. I think this is an entire straw man put up to make white people feel like they can't talk about issues of white privilege. That's my speculation, based on knowing PragerU. So, if you can show me examples of thousands of white people asking for forgiveness, I will reconsider my views. At this point, don't believe this happens. I don't believe it.
You're not fooling anybody. You're not helping black people or any other minority. And your public confessions don't make you look virtuous.
See, oh, wow, this is really amazing. So if you're a white person and you acknowledge you have white privilege, they're trying to silence you. This is exactly what I'm talking about. Conservatives. It doesn't matter where the conservative thing is coming from. If you buy into a system that perpetuates racism from the far right, you are helping it. You are its ally. So again, this is about shaming white people who actually want to speak up and out. And maybe imperfectly, and maybe they got a lot to learn. But the point is, white people don't challenge white supremacy. You know, if you try to fix things, you're really being selfish. And you're being patronizing, as opposed to being an ally. And again, I don't believe white people walk around asking for forgiveness for white privilege. It's hard enough to get white people to admit they have white privilege. And when you finally get them to admit they have white privilege, you've gone through the process of showing them all the data and explaining it to them. So if they're not just trying to misrepresent you, they're going to understand systemic racism by the end of the conversation. And therefore, they won't have to ask anyone for forgiveness for their white privilege because they understand it's a white culture problem, not a black person problem.
They make you look disingenuous, which is a really nice way of saying fake, phony, and fraudulent.
Wow, they really want to silence white people who want to criticize racism. This is, when I talked about how people want to delegitimize your critiques and tell you that it's not your place as a white person to question any of these things and they want to shame you into silence. Thank you for making my point, PragerU. Thank you for making my point, because this isn't about how to be a better person and talk about these things, I am sure. This is about white people. If you have an opinion, shut up. And this video will be watched by certain white people who don't want to see racism criticized and quoted back to silence white people who are trying to actually be allies and learn their way through allyship and try to understand better racial inequalities. Okay.
For starters, what is white privilege anyway? Because you're born with white skin, you have all these advantages that I don't have?
Yeah. Honestly. Yeah, you have the advantage to not be pulled over by the police while driving, while walking. You have the advantage of not having white Karens call the police on you and report you as a black man or black woman to try to bring the police over here to get you arrested. You don't have to worry about being born into a system of systemic racism or having your resume put to the side because it has an African-sounding name. There is study after study after study that shows candidates with the same qualifications will have different rates of job application interview success based on simply whether or not they have a English, a white sounding or an African sounding name. So yes, when your whole life is, if people who are black in America have to constantly go uphill every single day because of microaggressions and dealing with Confederate flag, people who show up to do work at their house and have to confront that kind of racism in their daily lives. They can't go into a shop and not have go get their hair products, and they're locked up because those hair products are for black people. I mean, yeah, you have a slap in the face every day, and that's just before you get actual violent, sort of like in-your-face racism, and that's before you get systemic violence in the form of like police racism, or, police brutality that is informed by racism. So if you have to deal with that every single day, you are walking uphill. And if you are white, the fact that you don't have to deal with that every single day means you're walking downhill. You're riding, whee! So yes, just being born white gives you a privilege in America of basically being treated like a human being by other white people. And everyone else doesn't. So, yeah, I have a whole bunch of advantages he doesn't have. And I have my whole life, and I did nothing to earn them. All I had to do was have white skin and have a white-sounding name. And that was enough. So, yeah.
Like what? Like you can get a mortgage loan that I can't get?
Yep. Yeah.
I got a loan.
You individually got a loan, but if you want to look at racism in lending, you serious? Should we look at racism in lending? If I can spell lending. Yeah, racism and racism in mortgage, racial discrimination in. Hey, let's go to the Springer link because that's an academic article. Right, we're just like debunking PragerU. I feel bad for this guy. I feel a little bit bad for this guy being put up as a token because that's what he's being treated like here. I'm sure he's getting paid well, but he's not doing anybody any favors. We examine trends in racial and ethnic discrimination in U.S. housing and mortgage lending markets through a quantitative review of studies. We code and analyze as a time series results from 16 field experiments of housing discrimination and 19 observational studies of mortgage lending discrimination. Consistent with prior research, we find evidence of a decline in housing discrimination from the 1970s to the present. Our results hold that this trend holds both in national audits sponsored by the Housing Department and in non-HUD studies. The decline in discrimination is strongest for discrimination that involves direct denial of housing availability. That's a housing, not a lending one, for which discrimination has declined to low levels because it's been made illegal and people can sue your butt now. This downward trend in discrimination is weaker for the measures reflecting the number of units recommended and inspected. A significant discrimination remains for these outcomes. So discrimination is weaker for measures reflecting the number of units recommended. It must be like the number of housing units. In the mortgage market, we find that racial gaps in loan denial have declined only slightly. And racial gaps in mortgage costs have not declined at all, suggesting persistent racial discrimination. We discuss the implications of these trends. So I feel like I just need to make a contribution here. And we're just going to copy this. And we're going to leave it a comment on the PragerU video. If I can just find my way to the comments. Where are the comments? Show me more. Yes, comments. All right. Add a public comment. We're going to quote this. And we're going to put the study link in. I'm trolling them with facts. I'm trolling PragerU with facts. Now, if, of course, I get a link in there, it won't show up. So I'll just put here, source, and colon. Boom. So, refuted. Boom. Yeah, it is easier for white people to get a loan. The fact that one black man gets a loan or any one black family gets a loan does not disprove the theory that there is systemic bias in lending. That's called anecdotal fallacy, which we've already just we've shut that down. We shut that down. Looks like they paid him to spout their nonsense, but there's also a chance he actually believes this stuff. Yeah, that's possible. I mean, it's hard to know what's in someone's mind or hearts. All I know is that he's repeating a pack of lies. Which we empirically just demonstrated from a study of studies, from not just one study, but like a meta-analysis. Can't wait for the phrenologist to show up and tell us about the African brain pan part. Yes. let's see. Black people might have the same rights, but social structures are still racist. Yep. And non-legal change is hard to achieve. That's right. You can pass a law, but you can't change that. A law won't make somebody give a black person a chance if they're discriminating, if they have a bias against them. Laws don't change hearts and minds. You have to have conversations with people, and that's why I think, it's really pushing this idea of white people owning racism as a white person's problem. All right, so let's keep going. Let's see how many things we can just prove in one PragerU video.
At a great rate, by the way, and I got the house.
Anecdotal
Why
fallacy.
would a banker not give a loan to someone who met the loan requirement?
Dude, seriously? See, this is an actual logic. It's basically, what do you call that? When you pose the question to which you want to already set up the answer. I can't remember. Begging the question. He's not demonstrating any empirical evidence of there's no more racism in loan provision anymore. He's just going, this is like, why would employers hire men if women are always cheaper to hire? The pay gap. If the pay gap was true, women would be hired more than men because they're cheaper, and it makes more sense for employers to hire cheaper employees. Yeah, except of course if you're sexist and you're paying women less, it's because you think they're less competent, and you're rewarding men of equal competence just because they're men. Right? And it's the same thing here. It's not, he can't just go, oh, how could this be the case? We've got the data. We don't have to ask these questions. We can check independent numbers gathered by government and non-HUD analysis and come to the same conclusion.
He doesn't want to make money? I've never heard of such a banker.
Well, he hasn't looked very far, because we've got all the data. Oh, Prager, you are terrible.
Or how about this? You can enter a store and not be looked upon with suspicion, but I, a black person, cannot, except that has never happened to me.
All right, again, anecdotal fallacies. Just because it doesn't happen to one person doesn't mean it doesn't happen. You just have to talk to a lot more people. And maybe you grew up in a place that white people already acknowledged their white guilt and their culpability, and they've actually transformed their community into being a place where everyone feels welcome. But but that doesn't mean you can speak for the experiences of everybody. Well, who is this guy? Let's see where Brandon Tatum lives. I've never heard of this person. So let's find out. This is it. This is the best they can do, is to basically find that one black friend. This guy, it hasn't happened to me, so then it must not happen. Don't think so. All right, he's an Instagram personality. He's a Facebook. Oh, look at this. Look at this. Looky. He's a former police officer. You think maybe he's walking in with his badge into these businesses and that's why he's not getting treated any differently? Maybe? Are you using your blue shield to cover up for your, trying to mimic white privilege by carrying a blue shield? Yeah, I can see. He's a former cop. Yeah. Wow. Yep. So he serves as the urban outreach director for Turning Point USA. He's got a financial interest. Did I know? Yeah, I don't care if you're a 501c3. You shouldn't be. You're a fascist arm of the Republican Party. So, yes. Okay, so we know where he's coming from now. And we know that he's got a financial interest in undermining this because, we can see this. And he's using anecdotal fallacies. This never happened to me, so it can't happen. That's not how it works.
But if I was a young dude with my pants hanging down to my butt, I could understand why the store owner would be concerned.
Oh, okay. So now we're going to racially profile people based on their clothing? Oh, wait, but you know what? I don't see a white hand with these jeans down to their butts. This is a dark person's hand. So what is really being profiled here? Is it the clothing, or is it the person in the clothing? Is it the idea that black people have to dress up in suits in order to be respected or treated as respectable? That they can't wear the same thing that like a lazy teenage white kid would wear with just track bottoms and throw on a t-shirt or throw on a hoodie? You're profiling bodies, not clothing. Because if you see white people looking like a slacker and it doesn't trip your wires, but you immediately hone in on a group of young teenagers of black young youth, and you say, oh, it's the fact that they're wearing this clothing that drew my attention, you're just lying. So he's trying to blame black people for not dressing up to the standards that white people find acceptable to not experience violence. That's what he's doing, right? That's what it sounds like to me. If black youth would just dress up with more respectability, that respectability will save them. But it doesn't. It doesn't. If we think about the guy in Minnesota who had a right to have a concealed weapon, he had his permit, he had his gun in his car for self-protection, and when he told the white officer, and when he went to get his permit to show him, because he knew he was, in a situation with an armed white cop, the cop shot him. It doesn't matter if black people do the right thing and wear certain clothes or talk in the same way. None of that protects black people who go outside and are targeted or seen as the enemy by police and by white people who are racist. So again, I don't think blaming black people for wearing comfortable clothing is the solution to this. The solution is white people and their racism, and finding excuses to blame black people for white people's racism. Owning that it's our problem and our racism, that's what the real issue is. That's the real work that needs to get done.
I used to be a cop. Believe me, I understand. If I owned a store, I'd be tracking that kid too, whether he was black, white, or anything else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, again, you're anecdotal, you're hypothetical. You don't know what you would do in those situations because you don't own a store. And even if you did own a store, you can't speak for all store owners, especially when you're coming at it from the perspective of a black person who knows that not every black person of course, you're treating every black person who wears baggy shorts or baggy, track bottoms as a potential criminal. So again, these are all anecdotal fallacies. This is just sort of like appeal to emotion, appeal to personal experience. None of this is as solid as the systemic data we looked at in terms of housing discrimination in loan rates, because he can't get over that. So again, this is just all about, it's putting it on black people. It's their fault for how they dress and how they act. And if they would just do XYZ, then they wouldn't be the victims. That's victim blaming. And that's not the problem here. The problem is racism.
Or what if I had a store that had a history of being shoplifted by young black women?
Why? What? Oh, okay. I see. So if you have a store that has a history of being shoplifted by young white women, it's going to be okay for you to just totally you don't think you're going to get the Karen moms on the phone to you? You don't think you're going to be called sexist or all of that? Somehow, again, it's assuming the criminality of black people here. Oh, let's have this hypothetical where a shop is targeted by young black women. Well, what's that make about white women? Why, again, this is setting up, it's begging the question. If black people commit crimes, how can you blame white people for being suspicious of them? Because your people's white-ass racism is the problem, assuming people are going to commit crimes, instead of treating every single person as an individual. And it doesn't matter if you had a bad experience with somebody else in the past. It doesn't give you the right to treat a stranger with this. This is exactly what Gabriel was talking about in the video from the happy hour on Kevin's channel yesterday. When a young black woman here, let's say you had a young black woman who does a shoplifting, then all black young women who come to the store have to be viewed as shoplifters because of that one person's action? All black women have to be accountable for the actions of that one woman? And yet when white people do something bad, it's just that guy. He's a lone wolf. He has mental illness. He's not responsible. We don't own the problems in our community the way that we generalize out criminality and delinquency and all the negative racial stereotypes that white supremacy and white nationalism, our culture, feeds us. So this is basically assuming the criminality of black people in order to justify their oppression. That's how I see this video.
And a young black woman with a bad attitude walked in.
Oh, okay. Now she's black, and there's a history of black women having credibility, and a black woman who is angry is obviously she's got a bad attitude. She's not justified in her anger. Oh my God, this guy is sexist, and he's also pushing racist lies. He's really helping white supremacists justify by talking about blaming black people for what they wear, by assuming criminality of black women in this scenario, and also saying that black women who have an attitude, that's their problem because they're bad people, not because they experience racism day in and day out. What a piece of crap this video is. Really.
Would I be suspicious? Yeah, I would. Who wouldn't?
Oh, yeah, white people, it's okay. I'm a black cop, former cop, and I'd be suspicious of black women who, had confidence and stood up for themselves. I would assume they were the problem if I wanted to perpetuate white supremacy. And that's what this is doing. I can't even believe how disgustingly racist this video is. And it doesn't matter who the words mouths are coming out of, the message is the same. The message here is to discredit and demonize and criminalize black people regardless of who they are as a person in order to justify white people saying, I don't have privilege, it's just that you're criminals and you don't know how to dress. So any benefit I get, it's not from being white and white supremacy and white nationalism in my white culture that I get to benefit from. It's you're not trying to be white. You're not trying to be white enough to be accepted. So dress more like white people and talk like white people and be deferential to white people. And then maybe you'll be treated equally. But of course they won't. Because racists never that's the problem with racism. It's like women can never live up to the standards of men because cis women don't have the physicality of cis men. But that doesn't mean that they're not of equal worth. Just being different doesn't make you less worthy. I mean, you making original contributions, you fill gaps, and the other person fills gaps, right? But if you're always held up to that sort of cis male standard, of course you can never meet that. You have to reimagine what the standards are. You have to have scope for all experiences and all possibilities, as opposed to assuming the white one is the natural, appropriate metric against which everyone else should be measured, and the cis male is the natural and most appropriate metric against everyone else should be measured, because when you are the metric, everyone else will fail, except people who are just like you. So
I call that common sense, not bigotry.
No, that's racism. That's total racism. That's total racism. But of course, he's now justifying white people's racism who watch this video and go, hey, I'm going to quote a black man to say it's okay for me to see a woman I don't know and assume that she's a criminal because of the color of her skin. And then if she looks happy and confident and might talk back to me when I give her crap, she's also problematic. And I can say that now because this black guy said I could. That is how you perpetuate white supremacy. White nationalism.
But there's another way of looking at this. In many ways, in today's America, blacks have more privilege than whites.
Yeah, would that be the privilege of getting shot in the back? Would that be the privilege of getting choked out? Shot in your car for legally owning a gun? How about being shot 8 times because a no-knock warrant was served on your apartment for something that you didn't do because you were fit the profile? Honestly, this idea that people who are getting a little bit of equality now suddenly have more privilege than white people is racist. It's absolutely racist. It's meant to say you should be satisfied with the little bit you got. Stop complaining about the half-cup measure when I'm drinking a pint, because if you're not careful, I'll just take away your little half cup as well. Be satisfied being second place. Don't recognize how far the white man has let you come. Look, you're free, right? Why aren't you thanking me? You're able to hold down a job, right? Why aren't you this is it. It's this idea that a little bit of equality is actually oppression because white people aren't getting preferential treatment anymore. There is a more equal playing field. And the saying goes, when you've always been privileged, equality feels like oppression. So this idea that black people have all this privilege is ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous.
It's been my experience that white...
Yeah, in my experience. Nobody cares about your experience. You're like one dude. Give me data. Show me attitudes, people's experiences of racism in America. As opposed to saying, well, hey, I'm hiding behind my blue shield. I'm a cop, so I got to basically stand there as a police officer. Right? And white people are taught to respect authority. White people are taught to be deferential to cops. White people are taught to be respectful, and you mistook respect for the uniform for respect for you. I speculate that's what's really happening here. You were treated like a white person because of your blue your blue shield. You were given the deference. You were given the courtesy. You were given the white polite society acceptance because you wore a badge. And therefore, you haven't had that pure experience. I don't want to say he hasn't had any experiences of racism. Clearly, whatever experiences of racism, he is not getting paid to talk about in this video. But to say that, especially knowing he's a former cop, it is hard to say, your experiences that whites have bent over backwards to help you when you're a cop? Well, of course. Of course, because you're on their side. You're one of us. Not really, because you're black, but as close as you could possibly get in a racist society. That's what you've experienced. So white people bending over to be backwards to be nice to the police is not deference to you as a black man. It is deference to the badge.
Whites bent over backwards to give blacks every possible advantage. If two people are equally qualified for a job, the black person will usually get it.
Where is the data for that? Honestly. Were you on a hiring committee in some sort of city and you're saying that there was systemic advantages given to the black candidates on hiring practices? Tell me what city that was in. Tell me what your hiring rate was. Was it 2% black hires or was it like 85% black hires? How did you qualify equal candidates when people have different experiences? So tell me that process. Oh, no, you can't. Because I don't believe you ever went through that process, and I don't believe that this is a systemic problem where black candidates who are equally qualified as white somehow unfairly get the job that they're qualified for? GTFO with that.
Big companies and prestigious universities fall all over one another trying to sign up talented black people.
Game time. What is it? Why would Indians have the highest average income in the U.S. over whites? Are you talking about Native Americans? Do you not know where India is? Game time. Are you talking about people from India? You know that people in America aren't from India. They're from the American continent, right? So people who are from India are called Indians. And if you are calling people in America Indians, you should be referring to, the Indian subcontinent country. If you're talking about Native Americans, you should call them what they are. So I'm just going to say, I don't know who you're talking about because you're using some old racist European term where they're found people they thought they were from India and just called them Indians because white racist people were really dumb. And then we just never corrected, as pointed out by Louis C.K. Also, if you're talking about incomes of 100,000, I would assume that what you're referring to is casino revenues that are shared in a socialist manner all across the community. So let's see. You want to say that I'm assuming that you met Native Americans and not people from India. Geography fail there. So median, if I can spell it, median income, Native Americans. Now, also not every person who's a Native American lives on a reservation where they have casino gambling, right? Well, look at this. What did you say? What did you say it was? What did you say it was? You thought it was game time $100,000? $100,000. $100,000 for these people, according to the 2000 census. Indians, Native Americans living in Indian country have incomes that are less than half of the general U.S. population. Being a Native American, this column is phrased racistly, you are half the wealth of white people. The U.S. Census reports that the median income of households based on a 3-year average from 2003 to 2005 was $33,000 a year. And in 1989, the median income of Native American households was $19,009. Right? So no, none of that 100,000 BS. I don't know where you got that number, but we just checked it and it's not true. So recalculate your estimates, take in that information and change your worldview. Wherever you got that info, that was wrong, but now you know. So you can change your mind. It's a good thing. Learning. Update your information banks. Change your worldview. It's called learning, growing, becoming a better person, hopefully. All right, back to this.
You are denying reality, which is what the person who dreamed up this whole thing did. A professor of women's studies at Wellesley College.
Okay, so now we're gonna go for the misogyny. We're gonna go in there. A woman from women's studies came up with the idea of privilege, and so clearly, if she's from a university, she must be a Marxist indoctrinator. So we can just dismiss it because one, she doesn't have a willy, and two, she's from a women's studies department, so clearly she can't think. Wow, racism and sexism all in one PragerU video.
By the name of Peggy McIntosh. She wrote in an article in 1988 about all the white privilege she thought she had.
Oh, she only thought she had it. Because you see, when the police officer guy who experienced life behind a badge when dealing with white people as a way to intermediate, as his mediation, his experience is totally valid. When he says, I didn't have a problem getting a loan when I put officer so-and-so on my loan application, I didn't have a problem with white people when I went in for my police officer's discount. I didn't have a problem with white people when I showed up for my free donuts. So how does racism exist? I didn't experience it, but now a white woman wants to talk about her experiences being white and how it's privileged her? Oh, she's ridiculous. We can't listen to a woman. We can't listen to a white woman reflect on her advantages in society and what, this guy knows better than her how she experiences her life? We're supposed to believe how the former black cop, we should just do everything on face value because he experienced it. No studies, no data, just, hey, I didn't have a problem getting a loan. I don't have a problem with white people. But when a woman talks from her experience, hey, shut her up.
She listed 46, including this one. I can choose bandages and flesh color and have them more or less match my skin.
Yeah, I mean, you think that that's actually ridiculous. That was one of the changes that was made now in the recent weeks. That why would you, if you have darker skin and all you can get is some pale-ass white people colors, that is not flesh tone. That is Caucasian tone. You have flesh as a person regardless of how much melanin you have in your skin. So all colors should be flesh tone because we all have flesh. But when you assume white flesh is the natural, default, assumed, beautiful, what everyone should want to have and the whole world caters to, then yeah, let's have a look at this because I think there were some changes. Flesh tone bandages. Yep, flesh tone bandages, and we'll check the news. Band-Aid will remake black and brown flesh tone bandages. Because you know what? Black and brown people have flesh. And therefore, by definition, their skin is flesh toned. Because they have flesh. It's kind of a weird word, flesh, I find. It feels quite, Fleisch is a German word. And now that I know that, like flesh, it feels very German to me. I can't really describe what it means to have a word feel German. But, yeah, this was from June 12th.
The founders of Ben & Jerry's have never been afraid of...
Turn that off because we don't care. And what is the 14th? Yeah, 2 days ago. This is actually a really topical issue. Band-Aid is creating a range of bandages that embrace the beauty of diverse skin, including hues that better match the skin tones of black and brown customers. Because white privilege assumes that white Band-Aids can just be used by everybody. As long as white people are comfortable with it, then everyone else should be made to be comfortable with it too. Why should we have to be sensitive to other people's... what if flesh tone was in the darkest shade, right? And that was called flesh tone. You're like, this is not like my flesh. White people would just be like, what is this going on? They don't see how the assumption has that negative impact on other people. Johnson & Johnson owned bandage brand made an announcement on Instagram. Band-Aid's traditional soft pink bandages have long been a point of contention among people of color who have questioned why white skin is the default shade for a range of flesh-toned products, including nude bras and other garments. That's true. When I go in to shop for makeup, there is nothing really beyond a heavy tan. I don't have to ask for foundation to match my skin tone because it's not even an option displayed for me, right? And the same thing with nude bras. You show up for a nude bra, it's going to be looking like the tones of a white woman. So you immediately have that, this doesn't belong to you. You don't belong here. You have to ask for where am I things? How can I, how can I participate? Because you're already outside of what is the norm. We stand in solidarity with our Black colleagues and collaborators. So yeah, here we go, right? Like, I'm used to these colors only being offered. Now imagine if this was the only color offered, it would stand out on your skin because it's not flesh tone. And if you wanted something that, blended in, white people don't have any problem getting those at all. Everybody else has got to work around the white people stuff. So yeah, actually, it's another one of those reminders that we don't think of you. We don't include you. Like, if you have dark skin, we don't include your existence in what we think our products should be. So yeah, that's totally racist.
Wow, that's some kind of privilege.
Now he's demeaning a constant stream of microaggressions that wear people down and make them feel excluded and make them feel less as not important. This is all about undermining white people who point these things out as unfair. And also undermining Black people and people of color generally who point these things out. Oh my gosh, you're complaining about the color of bandages. Don't you have anything better to... it's an example of systemic racism. And you can point to that. You can point to foundation makeup. You can point to the way hair products were locked up at big stores. You can point to all these things individually, and every single one, a racist person can say, oh, I'm going to pick up, this is ridiculous, this one thing. But you put them all together in a line, and then it spells out systemic racism because there's so many of them.
Soon others took up.
What is a parametric or non-parametric test? Okay, a parametric, so I can actually answer this for you, Lucky Wander. A parametric test makes some assumptions about the nature of the data that is being analyzed that allows you to better, that you can do more generalizations. So if you have data, let's say you have like a 10-point scale. So a lot of times parametric versus non-parametric tests are done in psychology. That's where I'm familiar with it. And non-parametric tests are for data that aren't really suitable for parametric tests. So an interval or a scale or some kind of variable with a number of observations, unlike, like 1 to 11, a scale of 0 to 10 would be an 11-point scale, with consistent sort of like spaces in between the various steps. That is suitable for a parametric test. And when you do a parametric test, you can say a bit more about your confidence generalizing it from the sample to the wider population. Non-parametric tests are tests that you can do on data that are not suitable for a parametric test, and they carry out sort of the similar logic of a parametric test, but they're not quite as rigorous and robust because the data themselves they don't have the assumptions of rigor that a parametric test would require. Does that help? All right. Oh, sorry. I thought you said, what is a parametric or non-parametric test? And I say, was it a parametric or non-parametric test? Anyway, got someone here who needs racial disparities in crime statistics explained. Yeah, sorry. I read it as is. And arguing with someone who thinks merit correlates with races. What? Yeah, that merit and races, that sounds dumb. I mean, my contention there is merit has to be very much operationalized in a way that is objective and consistent and can be done across time. And, races, I don't even like that word, but you want to talk about ethnic backgrounds, I don't know how you're going to do a correlation. Correlation is not the same as causation, and there's also spurious correlations. There are other things that can drive the appearance of a pattern of things going up or down together, or one goes up and the other one goes down, because of an unexplained third factor that you're not accounting for. So there's a mirage there statistically that makes it look like, for instance, if you say the murder rate in a city and the number of ice cream sales, right? You're going to see the slight correlation because people in the summertime get a bit more fed up and you have more opportunities for this isn't a very good theory, but it's just an example, right? People are more hot-headed and they're more likely to go off in the summer. That doesn't mean ice cream sales are causing people to murder people, or that murder rates cause people to do ice cream. They're both explained by the third factor of rising and falling temperatures that you're not taking account into a bivariate correlation. So again, just game theory. Just keep typing in that we did over and over that about the average income of Indians, because we've already proven that that's not true. That that Native American median incomes are about half of that of white people. So like if Game Time is just in here spamming lies and is not willing to take on new information, just block them, please. Because they're wasting everybody's time and they're being disruptive and they're not making a good contribution. So they've got their privileges of interactions revoked. All right. Saying racism isn't a problem because no one can point to a law which is explicitly discriminatory, but is refusing to acknowledge the application of the law isn't the issue. Yeah, it's culture and society. Laws don't have to be like... You can have a law that doesn't allow for discrimination, but if people in the society don't practice it and don't adhere to it, then you're not going to have justice. Just because a law exists doesn't mean the person who is the victim of discrimination has all of the resources and the ability to, sue a company and take them into court for racial discrimination in a store. How does a person who doesn't have the resources of like Walmart behind them, you try to sue Walmart for discrimination, you know what they do? Walmart just drags things out and they do a bunch of motions and they drive you into financial bankruptcy. So laws in and of themselves do not solve the problems. Attitudes are what drive the problem. And in the white culture of America, there are racist attitudes pervasively. It's a racist culture. It's a white supremacist culture. It is like on par with, it is a slightly nicer form of what happened in South Africa. South Africa, again, was explicit, right? But in the United States, we just use our economy and we use the prison system and we use the education system to benefit whites and disadvantage everybody else. And then we blame those people for not like rising above the conditions that white people never had to get out of, or very few white people had to get out of relatively. All right.
Up the cause. Today, these so-called progressives dominate our colleges and universities, imposing this absurd notion of white privilege on their...
Yeah, white privilege is not an absurd notion, but of course this is a way to use racism to undermine white people who actually care about racial equality.
Students. That's too bad because it does nothing good for white students, and it does nothing good for black students.
Again, there's no data for this. He's just talking out of his butt. That's it. Butt talking. These are just Prager lies.
But of the two, ironically, the white students get the better of the deal. Let me explain. To acknowledge your white privilege is supposed to make you feel.
See, this is it. This is exactly what I'm talking about. I know that white guilt is used in a way to weaponize it. White guilt is weaponized against white people who want to do the right thing. White guilt is defined as the sense of guilt or shame or responsibility that white people feel when they realize how badly white people historically and still today have systemically and systematically created, our societies that disadvantage people of color. And what conservatives want to do is say, you shouldn't feel that shame because you didn't do anything wrong. And that's actually where the white guilt comes from, in my opinion. White guilt is used by conservatives to silence white people from criticizing white supremacy. So white guilt is not the feeling. It's not just the feeling of acknowledgement and responsibility and shame. It's what's happened. It's also realizing that white supremacy is the cancer that lies at the center of it, and it's only through abandoning ideas of supremacy, of white supremacy and racism, that you can fix the problem. And because they want you to defend white supremacy, because they want you to keep the status quo, because they don't want you to rock the boat with privilege, they try to make you feel guilty for feeling guilty. They try to make you feel like acknowledging moral responsibility for the society you've inherited is wrong. And by hardening your heart against that responsibility, by making you resentful of the idea that you have a responsibility, who does that help? It only helps white supremacists. So this is basically a pro-white supremacy video in that it is giving white supremacists permission, cover, legitimation for preserving white supremacy. Because by blaming it on white liberals, they are the problem, their critiques are the problem, and blaming it on black people. If black people dressed better, black people just need to have attitude, then everything would be fine. It's really, really, really disgusting and sad.
So bad. Only it doesn't. It makes you feel good because by acknowledging your white privilege, you're declaring yourself to be enlightened.
So, yeah, shame people for understanding how they benefit from their own racism. When you finally have that moment of realizing, you will never get choked out for 8 minutes by a police officer, and you will never experience that level of brutality because of your white skin. And saying, wow, that is really wrong, and I need to do better. They want to make you feel bad for that realization. Who does that help? Who does it help by getting white people to scorn the idea that they have privilege when they clearly do? The people who benefit from this are the white supremacists because they get to keep the status quo. They get to preserve the status quo. They don't have to deal with their monuments getting taken down. They don't have to deal with questioning, acknowledging that football players in the National Football League should have the ability and the right to be on the sidelines before the game and express their free speech rights. Privately. They're not doing it in the middle of the field. They're not running out and disrupting it. They're not tearing down the flag. They are on the sidelines in their quiet moment, taking the knee reflectively during the anthem. You want to demonize that? Why? What threat is that? What threat is it to notice that there is systemic murder by cops? The only people who should feel uncomfortable by someone calling attention to that are racist.
And as a virtue bonus, it also makes you a better person than those whites who don't acknowledge their privilege.
Oh, this is such emotional and psychological manipulation to preserve racism. White people, if you get woke and you understand how you benefit from white supremacy and you see the unfairness, you should feel ashamed because you now think that you're better than the white supremacists. And you should feel bad about that because you're not better than those white people. This is seriously, I feel a lot of times watching a PragerU video, I realize what it's like to be in an abusive relationship. The way that they think and victim blame and gaslight is really psychologically manipulative and frankly evil. PragerU is evil.
White privilege, which is supposed to make you feel bad, ends up making you feel good.
So understanding the core of the problem and realizing you can be part of the solution and that you don't have to just passively accept or actively participate in the recreation of white supremacist attitudes and norms and just American culture and actually thinking, yeah, I can do something good. You should feel bad about that. Seriously, I don't even believe this video.
Meanwhile, the real damage is to blacks.
Oh, wait. I thought that there was no damage to black people, right? He just undermined the idea that they can't get loans. He undermined the idea that white shopkeepers are to blame for racial profiling, right? So wait a minute, is there nothing wrong in America? Because you just kept talking about how great your experience was. So where is the real damage when you just denied that there's any damage that takes place?
What makes whites feel good makes blacks angry.
Oh, okay. Everyone, the black angry channeler has logged on. And again, no data. No studies, nothing. He's just trying to speak from a position of authority, appealing to authority, despite the fact that his experience as a former police officer is not at all typical. And they're not asking anyone else for their opinion, just this one guy.
More than 50 years after the Civil Rights Movement, the message is, you're still oppressed. How can this not create a victim mentality?
Really? You want to talk about George Floyd in light of this video? Black people are oppressed in America. Black people are oppressed. People of color are oppressed in America. I don't know how this video is just going back now at all the things that people have been bringing up and issues that have been brought up since George Floyd's death. How can you say this? I don't even know how they can leave this video up. I don't even know.
And anyone of any color who sees himself as a victim gets angry.
Again, he's just doing crazy generalizations here. There's no basis. There's no psychological study here. He's literally just, whoever wrote this script, or if he wrote this script himself, whoever wrote this, is making things up. They're just lying to you. They're just giving you an uninformed, prejudiced opinion designed to preserve the white supremacist status quo.
Now, I wouldn't deny for a second that there are privileges in life. They're all over the place. There's two-parent family privilege. That's huge. There's being lucky to be born in America privilege.
Oh, God. Yeah. If you are born into a country where you are you are born into an education system that has been undermined because of the background of your family, and you are targeted by the police for criminality at a disproportionate rate to white people, and shopkeepers just assume you're a criminal, and everyone assumes that if you get angry about any of this stuff, you're being unreasonable. That is a privilege. It's a privilege to be born white in America. I'll give you that. Like, if you are white and you're an American, things are pretty good. Now, it doesn't guarantee everything's going to be great, but it's going to be way better than anybody else in America's life will be in the same situation. You put a poor white kid in a situation where instead it's a black kid, they're going to be worse off. And you might still be badly off, and you might have all these issues, but you have the privilege of being white because then you don't have all the other things that go with it. Being born in America is a privilege. For who? For who? When your rights are not respected, when you can be choked out and murdered by the police on a street, on a sidewalk, on a road, how is being born in America a privilege?
There's good gene privilege, but white privilege?
Good
doesn't
gene
it depend
privilege?
on the person?
No, it doesn't. It depends on systemic racism. It's like, I feel they don't understand any of the words they use. They just don't bother to understand.
Let's take this for example. A black lawyer and his wife have a baby, and a meth addict, single white woman has a baby. Which kid has privilege?
The white kid still has white privilege, even if it starts off in, again, they're such liars. This not talking about here, we're talking about white privilege, right? Notice the little logical fallacy they've slid in. On the one hand, we're talking about white privilege in the way in which white people do not have to wade through the racism of other white people because they get a white person pass. And that white person pass is their privilege. Whether it's the way they're treated by police or other people or their job interview rates or their ability to get into a university or anything, right? They get that white privilege pass. Now he wants to say, oh, let's talk about privilege. Well, again, there are all kinds of privilege, but if you are wealthy and black, you still have less privilege to get by in life than someone who is wealthy and white. So it's not about privilege versus privilege. It is about the privilege to not have to endure racism that all white people experience, regardless of where they are born in society. And that privilege doesn't somehow get negated because you're born into a poorer situation than a black person. You still live your whole life as white. If you run your car into a bunch of people like that guy did last week at the protest and who wasn't arrested, or you're Dylan Roof and you shoot up a church of black people, the cops will still take you to Burger King. The cops will still let you smoke without, being in handcuffs, despite being on murder charges. But if you are a black person minding your business and you happen to pass a $20 bill that's counterfeit like white people do all the time, you might die. So don't tell me that just because someone is rich, they have more privilege. A black person with money has more privilege than a white person without money, because a black person with money will still be murdered by the police for being black. They will still get beat down for jaywalking. They will still get shot by some random ass racist white people for checking out a building construction because of the color of their skin. Doesn't matter how much money they have. Doesn't matter what their career is, because when those white ass racist ass white people see that black man or woman or child, they don't see the attorney. They don't see the nice house. They see black skin. And they equate that with criminality. And you cannot get away with that if you live in a society of white supremacists. The only way to change that is to change white supremacy into an egalitarian society. I didn't mean to go off this much, but clearly I have a lot of things to say about this video.
The white one? Because he's white?
Yes.
Come on now.
Yeah, he still has his entire life without being treated racistly by racist-ass white people who are pervasive in power positions in this country. So yes.
And here's the kicker.
That's really an argument? Come on now? Come on now is an argument? Seriously? This is such fallacious reasoning. I really wish should do an entire course on how crappy these PragerU videos are, like a university level course. Oh, they would freak out. It would be so hilarious.
Even if it were true, all those claims about white privilege, so what?
So what if you're more likely to get hired for having a white name? So what if you're not going to get arrested because the white cop is going to give you a warning instead of a ticket? So what if you don't get a no-knock warrant in your house, and when you fire a warning shot back, you aren't executed by the police unarmed for matching the profile of a white person? All those things matter. All those things matter. To say so what?
Would it change a single thing I did?
Yeah, because you might have opportunities denied to you because of racism. So yeah, white people who don't have to endure racist attitudes and obstructions and barriers have an easier time getting by in a white supremacist culture because their skin color is not criminalized.
If white people apologize for being white, is that supposed to help me?
Again, that's not what acknowledging white privilege is. And by creating a lie, I mean, what good is an apology from a white person to a black person going to do? That's not even what black people are asking for. They are asking for white people to change white culture, their attitudes, and recognize other people's pain. Is it really so hard to recognize the pain of other people? Do you have to demonize my natural sympathies with the suffering of my fellow citizens? I mean, who again benefits from me othering them and dismissing them and not listening to them? White supremacists. Why would I want to benefit white supremacists? Why would I side with the oppressors over the oppressed? It makes no sense.
In what way? So let's be real. White privilege is an attempt by the left to divide Americans by race.
Criticizing white privilege is an attempt by the right to preserve white supremacy. If you deny the discussions of white privilege when we have observable, systematic, longitudinal, time series analysis showing racial biases, and you dismiss those and you don't acknowledge the way that you aren't going to get shot by cops just for being white. You can actually, if you want to look at that, you can look at the study I had before. We can't look at it. It's got Bayesian analysis. I can't be dealing with Bayesian analysis today. Bayesian analysis and racial yep. You can check this out. A multi-level Bayesian analysis of racial bias in police shootings. You know what they found out? That it doesn't matter what the crime rate is. It doesn't matter urban, rural. If you are not white, you are more likely to be shot by police. That's it. Let me see. Furthermore, the results of multi-level modeling shows that there exists a significant heterogeneity, means differences across counties in the extent of racial bias in police shootings, with some counties showing a relative risk ratio of 20 to 1 or more. You are 20 times more likely to be shot living in that county because you are black than white in the same unarmed situation. Analysis of police shooting data as a function of county-level predictors suggests that racial bias in police shootings is most likely to emerge in police departments in larger metropolitan areas with low median incomes and a sizable portion of black residents, especially when there is high financial inequity. But, this is important, there is no relationship between county-level racial bias in shooting and crime rates, not even specific race-related crime rates, meaning that the racial bias observed in police shootings is not explainable as a response to the local crime rates. That means people of color and black people are getting shot by police and crime they're not more criminal. That's what this is saying. It's not that they are committing more crimes and therefore getting shot. They are getting shot because they are black. So how can I stand by and go, that's my white privilege, but it doesn't really exist? Clearly, it exists because I'm not being shot by police at the same rates as a black woman would. So how is that not a privilege? How is it not a privilege not to be executed by the police, whose taxes I paid for with my, whose salaries I paid for with my taxes? So attacking white privilege is an attempt by the right to preserve white supremacy. That's the fact.
It's all theory and all nonsense.
No, this attack is all about preserving white nationalism and white supremacy. And white supremacy is evil and nonsense.
If you want to fall for it, go ahead. It's a free country. But don't try to sell it to me. I'm an American who deal with my fellow Americans one-on-one.
Yeah, from behind a police uniform. So I kind of don't think you have, in that situation, those experiences. And obviously he lives outside of a police uniform, but I think if it's one thing to say in a script, I've never experienced discrimination. I still think he's getting paid to say that. Maybe he's the lucky person who's never been self-aware to realize when a white person was being racist against him. I kind of doubt it.
Try it. It works.
What? Try denying your white privilege? Try preserving white supremacy? Who benefits from this? White supremacists.
I'm Brandon Tatum for Prager University.
And I am a paid tool of the white supremacy far right. Yeah. All right. What garbage. Ooh, gosh. So I think that pretty much is a great way. The way that PragerU puts a black man out there in order to attack white people who want to undermine systemic racism. And this is why, they're evil. PragerU, they are evil. They are fascist. They are a threat to our democracy. And they are literally a threat to people's lives. So, yeah, I'll just look at the chat a little bit and see what you guys have going on. I think you guys kind of took somebody on. Soft tech seems to be just making up stuff that goes on and on. That's crap. So people, yeah, have fun in the chat. I haven't been able to keep up with it. Okay. So the basic message of the show is, don't let white people intimidate you into not criticizing racism. If you're a white person and you believe strongly in equality and justice, then speaking up for that in white spaces is something you're going to have to do, and you're going to have to think a little bit about how you're going to deal with the white resentment and anger and fear that will then be directed at you. You will start to see the face of white supremacy, a face you hadn't seen before, at least not direct. That anger wasn't directed at you because your whiteness was protecting you. But as soon as you start to speak up and be an ally to racial justice, and you start to speak up and echo the legitimate concerns and complaints of people of color in America, white supremacists will see you as the enemy. And they will start to turn that white supremacist hatred and anger and, all of that on you. So it is, when you go out there to be an ally, be prepared that there are going to be some people who are going to come at you and they're going to try to silence you. And they're going to try to silence you because they're afraid of living in an equal society. They're afraid that they can't get by if they're not given an extra, advantage in life. They can't compete on a level playing field. And they could just be racist jerks who are just really not very good people in terms of, they don't align themselves with all people are created equal, and everyone in America should have the same chances for life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And right now, that's not the case. There's very few people who actually have that opportunity in America. Yeah, if you guys want to, again, let's see. Soft Tech, of course, explains so brilliantly why South Asian folks get regularly attacked by white supremacists. Yeah, I mean, this is the kind of stuff you guys are going to have to deal with. White people who are invested in protecting white supremacy. White people who are invested in dismissing the idea that there's anything wrong because they personally don't have the understanding of how discrimination manifests in America, probably because they're protected from being white, so they don't see it. All right, I'm done. I did my show. I'm sure, an hour and a half. See, and I didn't even take a coffee break. Hour and 20. That's enough. I did well. That's enough for me. I need to take a shower still today. I had a late night playing D&D, so I got up late, so my hair is like all this. And I still have my patron hangout later today. Thank you guys for sticking around. Thank you guys for making comments in the comment section. And I don't know what we talk about next week. Who knows? We'll find out. This week to week, who knows? But thank you for joining me. Thank you for your time and attention. And have a great day to all of you, wherever it is, wherever it is, wherever it is you are in the world. I've been Christy. You guys have been awesome. Thanks for stopping by the show. And until next time. Oh, I got to get my screen up and do the whole, like, hit the button in the right way. Otherwise, I'll just be stood here, like, smiling, grinning, and trying to go offline. Have a great day, and we'll see you again soon. Bye.